Here's some things to look out for from the media in terms of how they cover the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. We're going to cover right-wing media, left-wing independent media, and also mainstream liberal media. Let's start with left-wing independent media. So far, what you've seen from left-wing independent media is people basically aggregating their Twitter feeds to their followers on YouTube. So pretty much the algorithm is pushing them certain tweets that are talking about what happened and certain details about the shooter and whatever. And they're just taking that stuff and then repeating it back to you. Maybe some surface level analysis, but the priority is let's rush out and get some videos to take advantage of a trending story. Not a lot of in-depth analysis. You're not seeing them doing much research, not thinking critically for themselves and coming up with their own ideas, their own theories, assessing what actually happened, thinking deeply and asking a lot of questions about how things happened. You're going to see a lot of sort of, let's say, trigger happy from a verbal standpoint, quick to speak, not so quick to actually think. As far as liberal mainstream media, so the CNNs and MSNBCs, it's going to be a little bit embarrassing on one point. I mean, they've been doing a really, really, really good job. Certainly much better than independent media for sure. They're the ones leading in terms of getting the information out fastest, getting the most details out fastest. Like a lot of the stuff that I knew right away, that I was covering right away, that's because of mainstream media. Kyle Kalinske came in hours late talking about how did the guy get the gun past security. Mainstream media pretty quickly identified the shooter's location. They showed the video of him on the roof and talked about the fact that he was outside of the security zone. So mainstream media already covered that. But since Kyle is just watching his Twitter feed, he wasn't aware of that. But mainstream media has done a really, really, really good job covering it in terms of the details and also speaking to experts. They bring on, former Secret Service people, former FBI people, talking to experts so they can understand better about how these things work. How do you secure a president? What are the kinds of issues in terms of what the Secret Service had to do to protect the Donald Trump. But the part of the mainstream media that's going to be very difficult for me to watch and is very disappointing is you're going to see a both sides perspective coming from them. So the really aggressive rhetoric has been coming from the Republican side for sure. I mean, it's not that long ago when Marjorie Taylor Greene, she was saying some real crazy stuff. It was really, really riling up the crowds. I mean, they just have this, it's no holds barred, right? They say just about anything. And, listen to the way that Trump talks about how, they're going to destroy this country. They're destroying this country. Just really, really aggressive rhetoric has been coming from, the Republican side. But right-wingers are certainly going to highlight the very few times that you've seen similar rhetoric coming from, Democrats. And, they're going to try to make a false equivalent and say that it's the same degree. But what's going to happen for mainstream media and like CNN and MSNBC is they're going to completely ignore that reality and act almost as if there's been a problem specifically with the rhetoric coming from the left in terms of violent rhetoric. The main rhetoric coming from the left has really just been, end of democracy. This might be our last election. Some would say that sounds pretty aggressive, but I think it's warranted. But compare that to the stuff that Trump will be saying and Marjorie Taylor Greene will be saying and Boebert will be saying, and it's absolutely nothing. The stuff that they're saying is completely on a different level. So the idea of now trying to say, well, maybe the Democrats need to calm it down is kind of ridiculous. Yes, regardless of what party you are in, you need to be careful of what you're saying. But I think the proper approach is, the objective approach is, if you're going to talk about rhetoric, it should start with what's coming from the Republican side. And if you want to also say the Democrats as well, but don't pretend as if you haven't heard the craziness that they've been talking about. The other thing is, you have supposed left-wing media channels that are, in my view, trying to capitalize on all the energy that is towards the right. So taking a lot of time to talk about how heroic Donald Trump looked, like the Young Turks did. I saw a video by Tim Black that was quite shocking as a left winger. You know, Tim Black being a left winger. I mean, he was downplaying Project 2025. He was downplaying, you know, all the stuff that people, like how people call out Donald Trump for the craziness that he does. He basically was using a right-wing rhetoric of trying to act as if the big problem with Trump is just that he says crazy things, and that's all it is, right? So the left wing is just going hysterical just because he says some wacky things, you know, acting as if Trump is not that big of a deal. So this is someone who is aggressively left wing, shall we say. This is not a liberal. I don't know what he would describe himself as, ideologically speaking, but to hear that kind of stuff coming from him, you're going to hear that from also people like Revolutionary Blackout Network. So again, downplaying Project 2025, downplaying the threat of Donald Trump. They have to be contrarian to whatever the mainstream media is doing. So, you know, I think the main thing there is look out for very Trump-friendly sounding things coming from, you know, like the Jimmy Dores and, you know, Revolutionary Blackout Network type of people. Again, this, like Young Turks even, right? The heroic pose, him pumping the fists and you know, going along with, ironically, what mainstream media is doing, which is trying to act as if it's the Democrats are the ones that have the aggressive rhetoric. So you might see some left-wing channels that are gonna, you know, talk about, what's that woman, that crazy old woman from California, was the one who was like saying, like, we need to go in the streets and whatever, you know, highlighting stuff like that, which is what, you know, the right-wing channels would do. So sadly, look out for things like that. You're going to also see in independent media and mainstream media some level of, you know, because they're focused on views, right? So people are going to look at what happened and they're going to come up with certain theories and, you know, sort of questions, you know, could this have happened and why didn't they X, Y, and Z? Some of those things you're going to see repeated by the mainstream media. Things that can easily be answered, perhaps, but rather than dig into it, they're going to be asking these same questions instead of informing the audience, right? So, for example, the conversation about why that building supposedly wasn't covered when it might have actually been covered, right? Because one of the ways to cover that building is remotely from the rooftop where the sniper team was at, right? So there was a Secret Service sniper team, you know, they could have been covering that building. And there's an easy explanation for how he was able to still get those shots off. I covered that in a previous video. So there's an explanation where they were covering the building and still he was able to get a few shots off. But notice how in bringing up these concerns, they're not going to mention how quickly the Secret Service team was able to respond. I mean, I think it was something like 4 or 5 second delay between the shooter shooting and the sniper team taking him out. So they were on point. They were paying attention. They were ready to act. They were able to assess the target, identify the target, and take it out pretty quickly. But listen for some of those comments that may come from mainstream media. In general, not seeing a lot of depth from independent media. I'm expecting that to continue. Let's see how long it continues. Is there a time where they get out of the, you know, initial rush of like, oh, it's the trending story, and they kind of slow down and start thinking about things and doing their own research and coming up with something unique as opposed to just repeating their Twitter feeds. I don't know if that's going to happen, but so far it's just been them bumping around, trying to rush him. Oh, look at Donald Trump, this and that, and this and that. The guy is 20 years old, he's a Republican. Also, that's the thing I want to talk about too. Pay attention to, so the guy was supposedly, I believe, this is very new stuff, so I didn't get a chance to look into this, but I believe, I had an idea that he was a registered Democrat, but that may not be true. Maybe that comes from the fact that supposedly he donated to an Act Blue campaign. He donated $15. Ooh, big donation. Donated $15 to an Act Blue campaign. So either way, it seems that in the past there's some sort of left-wing thing going on with this guy potentially, but then currently he's apparently a registered Republican. So does the right-wing media ignore the registered Republican thing and focus on the Act Blue donation to make it look like he's a left-winger? And does the left-wing media focus mainly on him being a registered Republican and ignore the Act Blue donation? Or are we going to find people that will report both on him being a Republican and him, donating to Act Blue, and try to provide some level of context in terms of what does this mean? I mean, he's very young. There's not a lot of time for him to switch from the left to the right. So what was happening between him donating to this Act Blue and him registering as a Republican, right? Supposedly, I think they haven't found any social media. Is that actually true? Does he have social media, but they just haven't found it? So we'll see how that works. Right-wing media is definitely going to want to put this on the left. So I would look out for, right-wing media and right-wing influencers to paint this as, to add to their rhetoric of the left being the ones that are unhinged and violent. Their ideas don't work. So instead of trying to, solve problems or win elections legitimately, they go to the extent of trying to kill their political opponents. That's how savage the left is. Let's see if they try to push that rhetoric. Again, painting the entire left wing based on what one random guy who was a registered Republican, supposedly, right? Let's see if they do that. And let's see if the left-wing media wants to ignore the Act Blue donation and just he's a Republican. Right-wingers, it's always the right-wingers who are violent. Not saying that that's not true in terms of, some of the most violent things that have happened when it comes to bombs and whatever. It's typically coming from the right, and the typical strategy is the right-wing media tries to paint. You could have, I think we literally had this, a guy with Hitler tattoos, and it's just ignore all of that and just somehow find some picture of them at a BLM rally, and they're like, oh, it's clearly he was a left-wing person, right? No matter how overtly right-wing the person might be, irrelevant. Just ignore that. And just put it on the person's a left-wing. Anyone that does violence, it must be a left-wing person. Anyway, those are my thoughts. There's going to be a surge of energy in terms of MAGA. So let's see if there's anyone in right-wing media that greedily tries to take advantage of this. So go extra MAGA right now to virtue signal to MAGA people. So, just doing videos, MAGA, this and whatever. Just see if there's a surge in sort of virtue signaling more than normal to try and get those clicks from the energy of people, Trump as a martyr, that kind of thing, in the quest of anything for views. Anyway, this is the Debate Me channel. Debate me in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well. Stay tuned. Don't just be like a jellyfish, just going with the tide. When you're listening to the media, whether independent or corporate, left wing or right wing, understand where they're coming from, understand their motives and what they're trying to do, and see through the lies and deception and looking at things that they're not talking about as opposed to just reacting to what they are talking about. Think a little bit deeper, right? Don't just let them throw stuff at you and you just react to it, right? Be an independent thinker. Think for yourself. Do your own research. Don't limit your knowledge to what these people are feeding you, because many of them, their knowledge that they're feeding to you is limited by what they're being fed by algorithms, right? So be beyond that. Step outside of the matrix and try to get in touch with reality, which gives you the full scope of what's happening, full perspective, full details as much as possible, as opposed to a narrative, right? A profitable narrative that might be that they're trying to push on you, right? Whether it's mainstream media, left wing, right wing. All right. All right, guys.